Zeit zu.
Okay, so camera's rolling and the lighting's great. I've had a nice cup of coffee and I think I'm ready to go. Welcome everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sana and this is Strategic Chaos, where I talk about all things related to lifestyle and cybersecurity. In case you're wondering what I'm looking at, down here it's my laptop where I've got notes, because true to form, every time I dive into something or I talk about a topic, I have to have notes on it. It's a thing, but let's just roll with it. I want to make a few changes this year and be more consistent with my content and just kind of dive into my creativity a bit more this year, and YouTube is probably a great way to start. So I figured, why not get back into creating more content on my YouTube channel and then going from there. So I guess this month I wanted to talk about a topic that I know a lot of people have been definitely, especially this time of the year, sort of diving into and like considering and like looking into as to how they can, you know, improve themselves. But I know this is a topic that a lot of people have been pondering on. I know I have, especially given the fact that it is literally the first month of the new year, and I wanted to offer my perspective on the one key thing that I think you or we as individuals should make if we want to I guess become a better version of ourselves, right? As corny as that is, it's more of a mindset shift, and there are a lot of things out there that will offer different tips on it. But over time, after reading an unhealthy amount of self-help books and books on spirituality, I've come to note that there's probably like one key thing that will actually allow you to set goals and actually achieve them in a manner that doesn't feel forced, and that will inevitably allow you to stay consistent with achieving your goals, whatever that may be, right? So without further ado, let's get into it. But I'm gonna take a quick water break because I need a minute. It's been a while since I've been on camera. Okay, so before I start, I kind of wanted to just have a chat about last year, or 2022. I do this thing where towards the end of every year and the beginning of the following year, I like to reflect and just kind of, you know, use that as a checkpoint to see how I'm going, and if how I actually feel about the things that I've achieved or may not have achieved, or even just taking a breather and not doing anything. And I felt like a lot of 2022 for me was like that. It was very, I would say very slow, in the sense that I was still getting stuff done, but I wasn't aggressive about it. And when I say aggressive, I mean sort of setting timelines, setting deadlines, you know, setting sort of achievable goals and outcomes and targeting those. And in the moments that I did find where I almost got to the point where I was going to do the thing I said I was going to do, I found myself just stopping, and I couldn't figure out why. So for example, there were a lot of times last year where you know, I found myself sitting down and thinking, okay, today's the day I'm gonna write another blog post, because I do have another blog, I have another site, and I have a Substack as well. It's called thestrategicchaos.com, and I'll share the link to my Substack below as well. I would love for you to subscribe to that. But I have a lot of different sites online where I like to post content, where I like to post different blogs, different articles, and I found a lot of the time last year I would get to it, I would sit down and I would almost type something up, but then I would stop myself, and I had no idea why. It didn't click, you know. And then it was a toxic, I don't like using that word, but it was an annoying cycle, a toxic cycle. Let's just call it potato. It was a toxic cycle where I would wake up, I'd work myself up, and I'd be like, all right, today's the day I'm going to do it, and I'm gonna get it done no matter what. Even if pigs start flying, I don't care, it's gonna happen. But then I would sit down to do it, and I wouldn't get it done, or something would stop me to the point where I wouldn't even open up my laptop and get the blog post done, or even, you know, do the thing I was supposed to do. Not because I didn't have the time, but even when I had the time, I would find other things to fill that time with, when I knew that I could very easily allocate that time to writing this blog post or creating the content that I said I'm going to create. And I couldn't figure out why. And then I'd get annoyed at myself, or I'd get angry at myself, and that voice in your head would just like, just get louder and louder, and then you just kind of shut down. You know, I'd get overwhelmed, I'd shut down, I'd be like, all right, you know what, it's fine, not today, tomorrow, not today, tomorrow. And then next thing you know, it's been 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you know, 8 months. And while I did get things done, I know that if I had shifted my mindset the way I anticipate, the way I plan to, it would have looked a lot different. But I also feel that with all of us as humans, like, given the fact that we live in a hustle culture, which again, you know, pros and cons with everything, we do not let our bodies rest. And just like, you know, we have seasons, we have autumn, spring, winter, summer. As humans, we all go through seasons too. So maybe that was a season where I wasn't supposed to be so aggressive with my goals and my target. And you know, maybe there was a season where I was just supposed to rest. But having grown up in an immigrant family, rest is something that basically just doesn't exist in our household. So even trying to take a step back and rest was very, very hard for me. So you know, it was just a very chaotic sort of, there was a lot going on in there, in my head, which probably makes sense as to why my channel is even called Strategic Chaos. But I guess something changed this year. So in 2023, which is where we're at now, I actually was overseas for a bit. I went to visit family, and then I went to Fiji for around a week or so. And I guess my time abroad in Fiji really sort of something clicked for me. I spent the moments of quiet really sort of reflecting and going in deeper into why last year was the way it was and what I really wanted to get out of this year. And while I realized that nothing changes unless you change, I also think that a lot of it has to do with your mindset. And one of the biggest reasons why I didn't do what I said I was going to do last year is because of my mindset. That being said, we've all heard of the law of attraction, or at least if you haven't, just do a quick Google, just have law of attraction, Rhonda Byrne. She's Australian, I believe, and she wrote this amazing book a couple of years ago, and basically speaks to this principle, well, it's a principle. Basically, you know, what you put out there is what you manifest. And you know, she's basically got 3 ideas in there, where it's like you ask for the thing that you want, or you ask for what it is that you're trying to achieve. You really take the time to believe in it, or at least, you know, really sort of sit in it and picture yourself achieving that. And then you just let go of how you're gonna get there, and you just let the universe do its thing, and it manifests and you receive it. So she has these principles that ultimately feed into this bigger law called the law of attraction. For the longest time, as much as I understood it, I didn't. So me being me, I've continued to read a lot of books around the law of attraction and around self-help, and I've realized that a lot of it actually boils down to the way you perceive yourself. And what that means is just identifying how you view yourself, and your image, and where you see yourself going. But ultimately, in order to hit those goals that we also aggressively try to hit at the beginning or the end of the year, in order to stay consistent with being able to hit those goals, you have to change the way you perceive yourself. So if you do not, for example, view yourself as a content creator, but you want to, you know, post content out there, you want to, you know, put together blogs, you want to put together a YouTube channel, you want that YouTube channel to be profitable, you want to start, say, an Etsy store, but for whatever reason in your brain you haven't really pictured yourself as that, or you don't really see your day-to-day as someone who is a content creator and an entrepreneur, you're not going to make those changes. So what I mean by that is, unless you sort of take the time to really evaluate your thoughts and how you perceive yourself, and then actively make the changes around how you want to be perceived, you're not going to be able to really meet those goals in the short term or the long term, really. And I guess in order to be able to make those changes to achieve the ideal self-image that you want to achieve, whatever that may be, you have to focus on a couple of key areas, and everyone has different areas that they want to focus on or prioritize. But for someone who has thought about this a lot, I think that these are the areas that I personally focus on, and these are the areas that I have prioritized in order to help me sort of build the self-image that I want to be able to ultimately achieve at the end of this. So you have your 4 key areas, I believe, for me, okay? No particular order. I mean, no, it is a particular order, sorry. It is a particular order that fits me, but I'm sure it's different for everyone. But for me, I would say is health. And by that I mean both mental and physical, relationships, and by that I mean relationships with yourself, your creativity, and how you decide to either leverage your creativity and really sort of build on it and dive into it, and then your finances. Again, different people might choose to prioritize their finances first, then their health, and then their relationships and their creativity. But I choose to prioritize those 4 spheres in that particular order because of the way I feel that it flows for me as a person. So let me dive into it, because I feel like I'm rambling right now, which is probably what I'm doing. So I'm just gonna again have a quick water break. But let's start with the first area that I talked about, which is health. And oh, that was a big old knot. Jesus. Whoops. Okay. So what I mean by that, when I say health, I mean mental and physical. Last year, if I'm being completely honest, I completely slacked off with my physical health. I didn't work out that much, or barely, and as a result, it really did affect my mental health as well. I'm too stubborn to admit it, but even just going for a walk or a run 20 minutes to 30 minutes a day would have done wonders. And there were probably days on end, maybe sometimes even weeks, where I would skip it altogether. It's not so much, I've gotten a bit chubby around the waist and everything. Like, I've always been super comfortable with the way my body's changed to an extent. And just sort of accepted it and loved it for what it is. But I think it was more the fact that as someone who has always liked movement, and as someone who has always craved movement in her day, and someone who has a desk job, I did not prioritize my physical health, which inevitably affected my mental health. So going into this year, one of the main changes that I've been very, very persistent about, very mindful about, is the way I prioritize my physical exercise. It can be anything from 20 to 30 minutes, and it can be anything from like yoga to lifting weights to literally just walking or doing a light jog while I walk. But anything that involves at least around 30 minutes of exercise a day, or any kind of movement, is something that I'm prioritizing, with consistency being the key. Because as much as I want to be able to say, okay, I'm gonna just get up and work out 5 days a week and it's gonna happen, let's be real. Unless I build a habit around it, and unless I form that habit, that consistency is not gonna stick, no matter how hard I try. So one of the things that I'm going to try to do, or I'm going to be more mindful of this year, is just prioritizing my physical health and incorporating some kind of movement. On days where it is rainy and cloudy and gloomy, which, let's be real, in Australia and with climate change, there are a lot of days where it's just absolute hot trash, the weather. It's not always sunny like it is right now. Okay, there are literal days where it's just like not sure if I'm living in England or if I'm living in Sydney. So on days like that, you know, I choose to do a at-home workout, and that will involve going back to the basics with yoga. As someone who has grown up with a mom who is very much into yoga, she really taught me the basics growing up, and it's something that has always grounded me and something that I haven't been as persistent with, but this year so far been pretty persistent with it. So we'll see how that goes. But I feel like prioritizing your physical health then ultimately, at least for me, feeds into your mental health as well. When you go out and when I'm in nature, I find that the brain fog in my head gets a little lighter. I can think more clearly. I feel more connected to, I guess, my purpose and what I'm trying to get out of this. You know, ultimately, I do not want to be one of those people that just wakes up, goes to work, looks forward to retirement, and then just, you know, dies. Like, as controversial as that opinion might be, I want to be able to do something more, and that doesn't mean, you know, becoming like the next big like singer or anything, but just having a purpose that is more meaningful and aligned with my values. So in order to do that, in order to be consistent, I realized that prioritizing my physical and ultimately mental health is something that I'll be focusing on when it comes to changing the way I perceive my self-image. Another thing that I'll be focusing on this year is my relationships. And the first most important relationship, again, as corny as it sounds, is going to be the relationship that you have with yourself. I noticed that a lot of the time last year I had a pretty negative relationship with myself, in the sense that I let all the negativity, all the voices in my head just kind of speak to me a lot more than I should have. And I know the mind can be really busy and can be really chaotic, and there are times you should just dismiss it, but I guess I didn't do that, and over time I just let that sort of seep into me. And it ultimately changed the way I perceived myself and the relationship I had with myself. So a lot of the time last year, I wanted to get in front of the camera, I wanted to film things, I wanted to take photos for the blog and do things, but I was too lazy with even putting on makeup. And makeup makes me feel good, you know? I mean, I don't slap on a lot of it, and Lord knows I still don't know how to contour too well, but even putting on a bit of concealer and some eyeliner and a little bit of lip color does wonders for me. And I didn't do that last year because I just didn't think that it was important. I didn't really, somewhere on like a deeper level, I had a really negative self-perception of myself, and that ultimately led me to believe that, you know, no one's really gonna look at me anyway. You know, am I really that important? Like, do I really need to wear makeup? Like, are people really looking? And over time that sort of fed into other areas, and that's probably, you know, it led to a point where I started to get frustrated, where I was like, I want to be able to do things. I want to be able to create content. I want to be able to put myself out there. And right now I'm looking like a little sewer rat. And while there are rest days and there are days and weeks where you don't want to do anything, I know me as a person, and I knew that the way I was behaving was out of character. So this year I want to be focusing more on relationships, and particularly the relationship with myself. And by that I mean, even when there are days, there might be days where I absolutely do not want to put on any makeup, or I don't want to straighten my hair, or I don't, you know, I just want to sit there with a bun on my head and a big ass hoodie doing absolutely nothing, and that's totally fine. But there are days like today where even putting on a little bit of makeup and, you know, attempting to, I think, like crimple my hair or put some waves in it actually makes me feel good, so I can film some content. But ultimately developing that relationship with myself, being more mindful of the conversations in my head. So I have been reading this amazing book called The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment. I don't know if this camera is gonna like focus on it. Okay, it is. And it's by Eckhart Tolle. Ooh. And he is this amazing spiritual guru who was on Oprah's podcast. I believe her podcast is called, oh my gosh, I should know this. I listen to her all the time. This is embarrassing. Hold on. Her podcast is called Super Soul. That's it. Super Soul by Oprah Winfrey. And he was on there a couple of times, and I absolutely loved his content. And since I love listening to him, I was like, hey, this book's gonna be great, let's give it a read. And he basically, in a nutshell, dives into how, you know, to move deeply into the now, and how to sort of tune out all the noise in your head and become more aware of that noise, and use that awareness to actually step away from all the noise, which is ultimately leading to, you know, your suffering because you're listening to it. But a lot of it just speaks to how to achieve a sense of awareness and ultimately mindfulness, which I love. So in order to help build my relationship, or better my relationship with myself and ultimately other people, I have I'm still learning to practice the art of awareness. And one of the ways I've been doing that is by meditating just 1 to 2 minutes a day, and really sort of sitting in the stillness, as uncomfortable as it is. As someone who spent a lot of time last year, and well, in the past, just sort of constantly having music on, constantly having a podcast on, constantly having a Netflix show on in the background, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take 1 to 2 minutes where I'm just gonna sit in this quiet spot and just listen to nothing, just the sound of nature, maybe the sound of the water, like the tap running, whatever it is. Just sit in stillness, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and that honestly has been doing wonders for me. So I have realized that as much as I want to, you know, sort of dive into focusing on my relationships with other people, the first relationship that I need to fix with is myself. And then obviously dive into relationships with other people, and by that I mean friends and family. As I've gotten older, I've started to realize that my friend circle has gotten smaller. My family circle stayed the same. My friend circle has gotten smaller, and it has changed and evolved, and that is okay. In fact, that is probably going to happen when you start to shift your self-image and you start to incorporate that mindset shift, right? You're going to attract people that are in line with what you're trying to do, and you're going to probably push away people that don't agree with what you're trying to do, or, you know, they might say things like you've changed, and that's okay. That's freaking great. If people tell you you've changed, whenever someone tells me that, I just want to go up and give them a hug, and I'm like, thank you, because that's what I've been trying to do, constantly change. So that's how, you know, that's something that we should probably all consider when it comes to the relationship aspect of a self-image. The other thing that I want to dive into is creativity. So as someone who has grown up in a household that hasn't necessarily encouraged creativity, this is something that is quite big for me, and this is something that is very, very dear to me as well. Oh, this is a no for me. I'm gonna shift my hair back around. Okay. Let's talk about creativity here. So one of the key things about developing your self-image is using your inner intuition and getting creative with it, and changing the way you perceive yourself. So as someone who, again, has grown up in a household that doesn't necessarily encourage creativity, I have had to either travel abroad or take time to either move to a different location or sit by myself to actually realize that inherently, after I go past the whole survival aspect of, like, you know, getting a job and doing all of that, like, I'm ultimately a creative person. And in order for me to nurture that, in order for me to actually grow into it, I have to get comfortable with calling myself a content creator. So I didn't necessarily perceive myself as someone like that, but the truth is, when you're creating something, you're creating content for other people, that's what you are. Like, you're a content creator, right? It could be anything from, like, writing blogs to creating YouTube videos to creating digital designs for an audience to, you know, even creating any kind of art. Ultimately all feeds down to the fact that, you know, you're a creative person. So one of the things that I've noticed this year is I really started to dive into my creativity and incorporate it into all aspects. And when I say all aspects, I don't just mean like stuff for my blog and my site. I also mean for work, for my day-to-day. You know, I will spend time to use my mindfulness to actually, you know, I'll use my time to use I'll use the mindfulness that I've acquired. I'm having a bit of a glitch right now. I will use the time. I'm just gonna give it a minute. Ultimately, I have found that through this process of mindfulness and awareness, I can actually dive into a whole other aspect of creativity with myself. So there are evenings or times where I'll spend some time water painting, even though I cannot water paint, even if my life depended on it. But I will spend that time, you know, water painting or doing some acrylic paints, and I will just force myself to play and really get in touch with that side of me. Because as much as we all like to, as much as I'd like to believe that, you know, 9 to 5 is all that there is out there for me, I have a strong feeling that for me to find fulfillment and for me to find a sense of purpose, creativity is probably something that is a very key criteria when it comes to my self-image. So I've been spending a lot of time lately, and I plan on spending a lot of time this year diving into things that will inspire me ultimately. So anything related to art, anything related to being outside, anything related to topics that intrigue me are things that I will be spending more time around. And then finally, your finances. So I know a lot of people tend to prioritize finances, and don't get me wrong, I do too, but I have noticed that with the ultimate flow of getting your health together, your mental, physical, changing the relationship with yourself and people around you, and incorporating things that you're passionate about, all of these have a waterfall effect, which ultimately feed into your finances. Now look, everyone wants more money, right? Like who doesn't? Actually, that's a bit selfish. What I mean to say is everyone values abundance when it comes to money. But if you have a scarcity mindset, which a lot of us do, or at least I did for a long time, as long as you have a scarcity mindset when it comes to money, when it comes to finances, you cannot switch over to an abundance mindset. You will not switch over to a mindset where you're like, okay, how can I actually make more money? Like, where can I cut back on? Not just cut back on, but are there other avenues out there that I haven't explored that can actually allow me to make more money, right? Are there other side hustles that I can explore? Can I wake up maybe a half hour early, even every other day, to spend some time looking at how I can monetize, you know, looking at how I can monetize some of my side hustles or things that I like to do. So for a longest time, I did have a scarcity mindset, and it took a lot of inner work, and it still is, but I have noticed that as long as I come back to the creativity part of it, as long as I come back to my focus, which is ultimately to create content around lifestyle and cybersecurity and dive into topics that actually inspire, the finances and all of that will come. And in order for that to happen, I have to focus on things that actually matter to me and make that shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. So I'll probably dive into that later, maybe in another video, maybe a short blog post, maybe a reel, I don't know. But with finances, it's all about the way you perceive it. So if you hoard it, and I get it, inflation, you know, the world imploding, all of that. I don't mean just going out there and just blowing it like you know, go to a strip club and just like make it rain. What I mean is shifting your perspective so that you no longer view it as something that you have to hoard. You know, by all means, go in there, pay your bills, you know, pay your taxes, pay whatever, like make those payments. But then once you make those payments, you just switch it off. You stop dwelling on the fact that, oh crap, like I just had a $200 bill, like I just had to pay rent of like, you know, $2,000 this month or $1,500. Look, we're in Sydney, it's expensive, okay? But once you make that payment, you ultimately sort of switch your trajectory, switch your train of thought. So you go from, I made that payment, all right, let's go back to researching how I can build a, you know, a digital product that I can then sell on Etsy, and spend time diving into that and actually implementing it. Ultimately, all of this will lead to a change in the way you perceive yourself. So when you make changes on these four, at least in these four areas for me, I've noticed that that is something that will allow you to ultimately change the way you perceive yourself. So there will be moments where, you know, your self-doubt will creep in, and Lord knows, even as I've made this video, I've had multiple moments where I've just like wanted to pause it, you know, launch my camera across the room, hide my tripod under the couch, and never make this just stop creating, right? But I've powered through, and I hope that you are able to find inspiration in this video, or in, you know, in this channel, to actually kickstart your new year the way I plan on starting mine. So with that being said, we've come to the end of today's video. If you like what I ramble on about, or if you are keen to see how I actually developed this channel this year, please hit subscribe, and please like this video and leave comments, and or reach out to me on Instagram, because I would love to hear from you. Until then, stay safe and stay chaotic as always.